I have said for a while that TTPD is simultaneously very many things. I very much believe that at this point in time of Taylor's life, that it is her magnum opus, and I also firmly believe that one of the reasons we haven't seen either debut Taylor's version or Reputation Taylor's version yet is because we're not done processing TTPD. I think Taylor can see by the way her fans and people are reacting to things that we are not quite ready yet for the lessons that are to come out of the vaults that are for Reputation and for Taylor's version. With TTPD, Taylor released 31 tracks, and one of the prominent themes throughout a lot of those tracks was the fact that she was not nearly as happy as she let on. And in fact, at points in her life, she had been absolutely miserable, but had just put a smile on her face and went out on stage and did it anyway, because that is what the world expects of her, that's what her management expects of her. All of the people that stand to profit off of Taylor Swift, herself included, need her to be out there working. She has gone through the addition of the TTPD set to the Eras Tour. She has shown us the way that she was deconstructed, broke down, literally pew-pewed on stage, and then just primped and propped up again and performing. Even at the times in Taylor's life when she has felt like everything was taken away from her and that there was literally nothing left of her alive, she still got out there on that stage and performed. Taylor Nation has also gone to support the fact that there's a certain outfit combination that means Taylor is secretly miserable, and it is an outfit combination that we have seen somewhat recently several times. So much of what TTPD was about was, I have been miserable, I am miserable, I cannot be miserable anymore. Unfortunately, in order for me to own my life's work, I have to go through this spectacle. I have to be part of this spectacle. It is the only way that my life's work will be profitable enough that the people in the powers that be will let me spend my time regaining them. There were so many people, I've stressed this a number of times, there were so many people that thought that it would be a waste of Taylor Swift's time and that it would not be financially viable for her to do the re-records. In fact, many of us have believed that the specific purpose for the Eras Tour was to sell those re-records, and that is why so many of us expected at least Rep or Debut would be announced or mentioned or something by the end of the Eras Tour, or else what was it all for? And when she got up on that Eras stage so many times, so many nights singing You're on Your Own, Kid in front of tens of thousands of people, it is so fascinating watching that play out because it's simultaneous as like, oh wow, Taylor's not on her own. But in reality, yes she is, because she very firmly knows that if she reveals her true self, the true actual flawed human Taylor Swift person that is behind Taylor Swift TM, the brand, the perfectly popped up princess that never has a failing and never has a wrong, and anything that she does, it was just a misunderstanding and it gets resolved very quickly. That facade has been hell for her to keep up. She has said that over and over again in her music. She sat at that freaking piano scream singing, I gave so many signs, so many times, but you didn't even read the signs. You didn't even read the lyrics. That's how many of us interpret that to mean. And look, I'm not saying that I have it right, but what I am saying is that I do have a framework that I'm working on for understanding the album, her work as a whole, her life, her purpose as a whole, to better understand what she is trying to do here, trying to meet us at midnight, trying to reveal that true self of her to us. And a lot of us did think that this was going to be something that was kind of like a boop. It was just going to happen. It was going to be Truman Show-esque. She was just going to pop up and say, hey, I'm here. And maybe at some juncture that's going to happen. Maybe at some juncture there's going to be a tell-all interview, or she's going to do an autobiography, or we're going to get the uncut version of Miss Americana and the Heartbreak Prince, or we're going to get the documentary that she's currently working on that has her being filmed a number of places. Like, she has been filmed so much in the past couple of years by her own people, ostensibly for this documentary, or I'm assuming it's a documentary. It's so fascinating because when Taylor talks about it, she almost talks about it in the sense of like fairy tales based on her own life. So I almost wonder if whatever she's working on isn't fictional to some extent, fictionalized to some extent. I have assumed that at some point in time, at some juncture, she was going to be like, hi, man behind the green curtain, this is who I always am, this is who I've always been. But I do know that one of the reasons that we have not gotten Rep Taylor's version, we have not gotten Debut Taylor's version, we have not even gotten an announcement of either of them, is because of the fact that we're still supposed to be focusing on TTPD, on the Eras Tour, on paying attention to the journey that she went through with the Eras Tour, both physically and metaphorically. And when I say that this is an overall framework, the reason I say that is because that there are a lot of theories that other creators have that very well, very nicely fit within the framework that I'm building. Okay, so like a lot of people have theories around The Wizard of Oz, a lot of people have theories around Weekend at Bernie's, Flowers of Algernon. A lot of those things I have just magically managed to put together in this theory. And a lot of people have treated various theories as though they must compete. If the albatross is about one thing, it can't be about another thing. If Robin, the song, is about Robin Desner, it can't be about Robin Goodfellow. And if it's about Robin Goodfellow, it can't be about Robin Williams. And if it's about Robin Williams, it can't be about the dawn of Taylor Swift's early life. But what if I told you maybe it's about all of those things simultaneously all put together? There have been so many references to coding, encoding, decoding, to secret messages, all of these different things about having keys to these vaults. I think so many pieces of information that she is giving us through her visuals, through her music videos, through the behind the scenes, through the embroidery on her clothing, through the jewelry that she wears, through the specific words she says and the times that she says them, I think all of these things are coming together for this message that she's conveying. So something that I've expected from Taylor for a while is a double album, right? Because for a while now, she's been playing both sides of the narrative coin. She's been playing that media narrative coin where she's in these long-term happy relationships with men that nobody hears anything bad about until the very end when we get the albums about them. And then there's the flip side of the coin, the side of the coin that is like, hey, I have actually had to conceal a huge amount of my life from everybody. I have needed to conceal everything that I am, all of my desires, keep my longings left locked in vaults, and presented myself as somebody that I am not, for the sake of my business, for the sake of all of the people that are supported by my business. She has been playing both of those narratives incredibly strongly, and I think that is why so many of her fans have gotten so confused. She has one narrative where she is using her famous friends and the media to tell an epic love story with her and Travis, and it very likely didn't begin with her and Travis, and she's also been giving some really strong hints to this all along. There are quite clearly two narratives that have been in place at least since Reputation, but very likely much before that. The narrative of Taylor Swift, the brand, the perfectly perfected, perfect pop star who lives out these larger-than-life romances with these perfect men and goes on perfect dates in perfect outfits. Then there's the narrative of Taylor Swift, the real messy person who has flaws, who is a functioning alcoholic till nobody noticed her new aesthetic, and who has to keep her truest belongings locked up secret in a vault so that the messy, flawed individual underneath can remain safe. And increasingly, we are having more and more signs of this messy person underneath sneaking out. All of the mental health issues and all of the addiction issues that are discussed in TTPD are a really big window into an aspect of Taylor's personality, Taylor's life, that she has previously only really hinted at. Whenever Taylor does something that is messy, there is a race for people to rebuke her. We have these standards about women, about how the media basically tells us to hate a specific woman, and very often it is because that woman is being perceived as having too much power, being too big for her britches, whatever it is. People get so hell-bent on these ideas that these women are too high up, that they need to be taken down pegs. And it's so frustrating to me because we very seldom see this happen to like mainstream actors. And when we do, they're never white or they're never straight. It is always these marginalized, these women, these non-white people, these queer people. It's always these marginalized people that seem to take the brunt of their flaws, even though white men have the same flaws. White men very often have much worse flaws, and very many of them are just allowed to exist in Hollywood. Like, the reason we have so many people that have bad stories about growing up in Hollywood and being in Hollywood is because the corruption starts at the top with the most powerful figures. And I think until she owns all of her music and has her full story out there, she is going to be clinging on to this protection, because obviously we see with Scooter Braun entering into the fray with Blake Lively and that whole situation, it definitely seems like Scooter Braun is not done with Taylor, and it really does seem like there are a lot of people that seek to attack her, to seek to take her out of her position. And I would like to remind everybody, like, she does not just financially support herself. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of people that work for her various companies whose entire livelihoods are dependent on the income that Taylor makes. It is not just Taylor having to be like, okay, if I'm not as famous because I reveal my true self, I'm just not as rich. It's, if I'm not famous because they don't like my true self, I have to lay off a lot of people who have been working for me for many years. A lot of people that work for Taylor Swift's companies have worked there for decades. They are people that are as close as family. Like, there's a reason why Taylor gives her truck drivers $100,000 bonuses. The people that she trusts implicitly, and she values their trusts in financial rewards. So we have these two competing narratives that are both taking place in TTPD. We have the first half of the narrative, the actual main part of the album, the part that we knew was coming, that I believe is Taylor Swift the brand story, and then we have the anthology, the part that almost seemed like an afterthought. And anthology is really interesting for a lot of reasons, right? Because a lot of like the diehard fans, especially your Folklore and Evermore girlies, we loved TTPD, especially the anthology, and we were desperate for it on vinyl, on CD, whatever. And if you know the music industry, you know that things like pressing CDs and vinyls takes a decent amount of time. It's something that you need to have advance notice of. And I suspect it would have made a decent bit of money if it would have been available at the very beginning in a physical form. Obviously, she did eventually sell it many months later at Target, but a lot of fans had made their own copies by then. And I want to talk about how many months it actually took to get a copy of the anthology. That leads me to believe that the anthology was something that was like right up to the last minute. And a lot of things that Scott Swift has said make me think that he had not necessarily heard the anthology. Blood's thick, but nothing's like a payroll. When you work in a family business with your parents and your brother, that is a hit. That is a dagger. That is not something that is meant to be ignored. That is obviously a strike out, even at her own family. If I was Scott Swift and I heard blood's thick but nothing like a payroll and they never spared a prayer for my soul, I don't know if I would be able to say that was my favorite album, even if those were like old feelings that we had worked through. And I do think in both half of the albums that there are a lot of red herrings. She has basically hinted at almost every single muse possible in at least one or more songs in this album. There is something for every level of theorist. And I've said this before, and I want to rehash it because I'm sure that this is going to get out to people that have never seen my other videos on TTPD. But Taylor seemingly has realized that people are more interested in dirt on the people that she's allegedly dated, on gossip from her relationships, than they are about songs that are about her and her deepest feelings and all of those things. Like when you look at the way people have treated songs like Me, songs that were her favorites, songs that I love the corniness of that song. There are so many songs of hers that have been about her and that she has really loved and no one has glommed onto. And honestly, maybe one of the reasons why she keeps singing You're on Your Own, Kid is because it was one of the first songs that was about her that people actually listened to, people actually cared about. I think there are a lot of red herrings for a lot of different muses in this album because she knows if she talks about the muses and things like that, or if she seems like she's talking about the muses, people will dig deeper for deeper levels of meaning. But if she doesn't, they're much more likely to not do that. If she just says the songs are about herself, people don't dive in as deep as they usually would. I also believe a lot of the hymns that are in TTPD especially are actually Taylor. We know that Taylor has posited herself as the man before, and I think it is very deliberate the fact that she has always called herself the chairman when it is related to TTPD. I think when she is discussing the way she has hurt other people, especially in relationships, she very often puts herself in the male position because that way people aren't hating on her, they're kind of like hating on her exes. And I think one of the ways that she's hidden what she's done with the anthology is by putting it in reverse track order. I don't think most people have listened to it that way unless it was by me hammering it in their head. Like, you need to listen to the whole of TTPD in reverse order, but especially the anthology, and especially those first like 4 or 5 tracks. And I think anybody who has listened to TTPD in reverse track order for my Dead Poet Society theory agrees that the album really flows good that way, and the manuscript feels more like a track 1 than a track 15, 17, whatever it is. The manuscript is the true story of the girl that gave up everything that was of value to her because she didn't realize at the time it was valuable. She thought she was trading something worthless for something that had infinite value, when in reality she was doing the reverse. She was trading her identity, her freedom, everything she was as Taylor Swift, the child, the person, as she went into the recording industry, and she is trading that for the career that she thought was her dreams. And realistically, when you're like 13, 14, going into to being a pop star, you have no real idea what that means. These children are signing these very extended contracts, or their parents are signing these contracts for them, and a lot of times things like morality clauses, things like you need to behave this way in public clauses are agreed upon without, I think, everybody involved realizing how hard it is really, truly to suppress who you are. Because the only way someone can become as big as Taylor Swift has is by wearing off all of the rough parts so that you don't burr on anybody else, right? You have to get rid of every part of yourself that might be abrasive to others. And this is absolutely not something that Taylor Swift is alone at. I think a lot of like your A-list high achieving celebrities have had to do this. I do think she's slightly unique at bringing this much attention to what she's doing and how she's doing it while she is still like in the guise of Taylor Swift the brand, but she's in the process of slowly unmasking, I believe. It is so unusual for people to hint at the fact that they are lying, that they are not telling the truth, that they are deceiving their audience, that there are bait and switches involved, that there are red herrings involved, that the truth is encoded behind the lies. It's so uncommon for somebody to do that at the height of their game. And what I think I can promise you is that like at the end of Taylor Swift's life, when she's like publishing her autobiography or releasing her memoirs, or she's got a documentary or whatever it is, we're going to look back at so many of these songs, so many of these things that she did, so many narratives that she wrote for so many different purposes, and we are going to be amazed by everything that she managed to achieve. Taylor has been battling this image that her first publicist created for her ever since the beginning of her career. Her first publicist, Paula, the one who predates T-Pain, she had established this image for Taylor that was very goody girl, like absolutely angelic church girl next door type vibes. This was during a period where purity was very heavily valued, and even just being in a couple of brief relationships, like I think she had been in like 2 or 3 relationships, and everybody was like, God, she needs to settle down. They were really, really slut-shaming her. There are a number of things that it became very clear that Taylor used as defensive PR strategies. That's something that I talk about a lot on my channel, is the way that she has utilized PR to protect her image and who she is and all of those things. But Taylor has always been an artist who greatly emotionally benefits from her listeners relating to the things that she's been through. And if all of her songs are entirely oriented on lies and PR and things like that, she's not going to get that validation that she so desires. I mean, that validation is so important to her that she mentioned it every night at the Eras Tour in the Champagne Problems speech. She needed that emotional recognition. She needed to know that the people that listened to her lyrics most closely would still accept her, even if they got close to knowing who she actually was. Because I think as somebody who has masked a lot myself, there is this very ever-present fear that everybody is going to know that I've got a mask on, that I'm faking it, that I'm not really this person, and that the moment they realize that it has been a total farce, and that this is just something I'm putting on to be socially acceptable for others, like I played straight for 20-some years in relationships with men, and like all of these things that I did, I was so desperate for literally anybody to see the actual real person underneath and still love that person, still accept that person. I think especially when other people really love this persona that you've invented, it becomes very, very, very difficult to love yourself for the real person that's inside, because there's this nagging worry in the back of your head. As soon as they know who I am, they're not going to like me anymore. As soon as they know who I am, they're not going to like me anymore. And I think that's one of the reasons that we have had, like, obviously, Eras Tour being like this huge and massive tour was going to be something that was going to cause Taylor tears and things like that. But it definitely, you could really feel going into those last 6 shows that she was sad, that she was really sad to see it go. She still put on a tremendous performance every night, but you can really see in between songs, like she lets the mask slip. And I honestly think that some of those like let the mask slip TikToks, where you see her like after a song, she's like, are to demonstrate how well she can get it back together. I think that she is letting that mask slip more and more over time, letting more and more of herself slip free, so that we are seeing more and more of the actual person underneath, and therefore we are having the opportunity to decide if we like that person. And now, unfortunately, I think one of the problems that does come up is that anytime you say anything about Taylor Swift, even if it's flattering and it goes against the common narrative that a lot of people have based on what's in the news media and things like that, people get very hostile. I think people are very attached to this mythos that they have assigned Taylor Swift. They have this idea that they know exactly what the songs are about, and that they know who the songs are about, and that all of those things. And I think one of the big things that the Eras Tour was supposed to do was to get like some of her biggest spending fans to stop associating a lot of those songs with Taylor and her exes and all of those previous moments in that history, but more so to get them to associate those songs as those moments that they shared together with Taylor at the Eras Tour. And I want to discuss media in the context of other media more, because it's something that is coming up increasingly about Taylor Swift. And it's something that I've been thinking about really strongly ever since she started hinting at Dead Poets Society so strongly, and since I started developing theories along those lines. But I think very often Taylor is doing this interesting thing where she's like having media refer to other media, or she's perceiving media through the lens of another piece of media. And I thought that this was entirely just something fabricated in my head until I saw this video on TikTok, and it's Jack Antonoff, and in that video, a fortnight before TTPD's release, he was talking about Flowers for Algernon through the context of like Weekend at Bernie's. And that really got me thinking about so many different things. This is going to be an entire video on its own, where I'm just going to introduce the concepts here. Hopefully it whets your appetites for more. Because I also believe that it is not just Flowers for Algernon in the context of Weekend at Bernie's, and vice versa, but it is also Truman Show through the context of Wizard of Oz. Two franchises that Taylor has been mentioning and referencing a ton of times in her work. So in Weekend at Bernie's, you've got the namesake character who is dead for the entire movie, but he's still propped up enough to be entertainment. And when Jack is describing it to his wife, he is describing it in the context of like, what if Weekend of Bernie's, the prequel, is basically Bernie slowly realizing that he's going to die? That seemed to be the point that he was getting through. So Weekend at Bernie's, you have this character who is deceased throughout the entire film, and yet still he is the main title character, and he is propped up enough by others to like make a movie out of it. And I think that it's so interesting that Jack is mentioning this right before TTPD, when we know the TTPD set has this, moment where she, passes on stage, and then she is being propped up by her dancers, and then she is like reanimated, even though she's not really alive anymore. Even though Taylor Swift is dead, they have reanimated Taylor Swift the brand, and they have had her put on that facade, and had her go out on stage, and had her go out and be Taylor Swift even when she is miserable. And I think adding the context of Flowers for Algernon is fascinating, because in Flowers for Algernon, Algernon is a mouse, a rat, oh god, it doesn't matter. He's a mouse for now. And so Algernon is this mouse, and it is a mouse that is going through this medical process to be made more smart. And Algernon's tale is told through the format of progress reports that are being written by the first human to go through the same process that this mouse has gone through. Now, unfortunately, because both the human and the mouse are test subjects, they don't realize that, yes, their intellect and everything like that is going to start increasing, but also at the very end, it sharply declines. And because you have this story being told through somebody that is actually going through this process, like first person, you see the progress reports like slowly start off not being written as good, and then they get better and better written as Charlie's intelligence increases. And then as he starts to decline, you see that decline. There's a lot of themes about intelligence versus emotion. There's a lot of themes about like acceptance when you know that something is going to happen to you. Algernon declines before Charlie does, so Charlie knows exactly what his fate is going to be. And again, just like Weekend at Bernie's, there are a lot of ways that we can reflect that towards Taylor's life in the Eras Tour and what we're seeing there, right? Having Flowers for Algernon written in that first person, where you get to see the increase and then the decrease, the incline and then the decline, it is so powerful, and it really makes me think more about TTPD and how it really feels like there are certain songs that are done at a more immature more emotional state, and then there are other songs that feel like a more mature emotional state. And I would be really curious to know how old some of these songs really are. Like, I wager some of the roots for some of the songs from TTPD originate much earlier in Taylor's career than we would realize. But then you also have this thing where Taylor's decline as a pop star is foreshadowed. She has seen the way the industry chews up and spits out so many other figures. And a lot of people forget that she shared like management or whatever. One of the managers that she used to work with very early on also worked with Britney Spears. And this was like right before Britney Spears was going through her breakdown. This is like right before 2008 Britney Spears. Taylor Swift got to see much closer than most people Britney's decline, how her family handled it, things like that. That's my theory, at least. It's very unlikely that Taylor was completely unaware of this. It is very likely that Taylor saw the way the industry chewed up, spit out, handled pop stars, and that she really sought to do anything in her power to prevent that. And it definitely seems like one of the ways that she has done that is by reading other people's stories. The wisest women. She knows that there are other people that have managed to survive being chewed up and spit out. Elizabeth Taylor is a really great example. She was very, very famous. She had a very specific image that was attached to her, and she managed to find ways to make it work so she could survive, so she could have a long life, you know, by Hollywood actress standards, for sure. One thing I find particularly interesting about Flowers for Algernon is the fact that, like, is the story being told through these progress reports really makes me think of stories being told through the context of songs. And just how much Taylor has really become an overall storyteller, a very multimedia-oriented storyteller over the course of the past few years of her career. I am very excited for her to get into film, and I do think one of the reasons that she is referencing film so much and things of that nature is because that is one of the next big things that she wants to, you know, take under her, you know, storytelling arsenal. We know that she's very much got a lot of things in play right now. I am so here for her director era. And Taylor clearly consumes a lot of media. If you look at the things that she references, if you look at just like the things she's talked about, the things like she's visually referenced in one of her music videos, things that friends of hers have mentioned that are in context of her, like this Jack video wasn't necessarily in the context of Taylor, but you can hear her laugh in it, and coming out 2 weeks before Fortnite and being filmed in a recording studio setting, it gives the impression that Taylor is in the room. And this is a conversation that they were having before TTPD came out. I do believe that the reason this footage was released is so that we can kind of get used to seeing her work in the context of other work, seeing film references in the context of her work, but also like from a coding perspective and from a, if we relate this song to these characters, we will relate traits of those characters to these songs. Like, especially with Dead Poet Society, there are a lot of people who interpret the two main male characters' relationship as having a lot of homoerotic nuances. And then I want to bring in Truman Show and Wizard of Oz, because these are just two interesting franchises in and of themselves, but also franchises that, like I said, Taylor has been referencing a lot. One of the things Taylor has done at the Eras Tour is emulate Jim Carrey's moves when he was playing Truman in The Truman Show on stage. And I think that's been very interesting. It's something that a lot of us have noticed and thought about and discussed. In The Truman Show, the main character realizes that he is in a simulation and he seeks to break free, even though there are a lot of things that are trying to prevent him from breaking free, because a lot of people are making money off of him. The parallels to Taylor's life and Taylor's current situation are very apparent. But then I also said, through the context of Wizard of Oz, one of the big takeaways of the Wizard of Oz is that yes, the power has always existed in you to get home. You just needed to learn how to use it. When you talk about Taylor's upbringing in the system and everything like that, and you just needed to learn how, I am so hopeful that Taylor has learned how to take her power. I am so hopeful that Taylor is getting ready for the blender. I can only hope that all of these references, and like I said, Truman Show through the context of The Wizard of Oz, you have always had the capacity to get out of this on your own, Taylor. You just needed to go through the journey. You just needed to follow the yellow brick road to develop yourself and the people around you into their forms, because I think that's such an important key of Wizard of Oz too, is it's not just about helping you, fixing your problems, fixing your needs. It is about the people that you come along that help you through your journey, helping those people too. I think a lot of her journey has been about not letting people around her feel like they are on their own the way she had felt like she was on her own at the beginning. She has obviously trained a lot of the people around her in the way she utilizes PR in their media strategies. Everything with Sabrina and how her relationship with Barry just happened to break up right before the Christmas special that she had on Netflix. That is obviously Taylor Swift's school of PRing right there. I have analyzed TTPD in the context of Dead Poets Society because I know that Taylor is mushing those things together. She put those actors in the Fortnite music video for a reason. She's making so many quiet references to Dead Poets Society because she wants us to look at those two things in conjunction. And to see those two things in the way that they're similar, in the way that they're dissimilar, in the themes that they both have, I compare it almost to having like a colored lens for your camera where it kind of colors the things that you're perceiving. If you perceive something like TTPD in the context of Dead Poets Society, it focuses a lot more on this concept of like having disagreements with like your parents and the people around you about what your future should be, and you know, having daddy issues and all of these kind of like subtextual themes that have been in Taylor's work that she really hasn't been able to say. Like, I have been on the Taylor Swift has daddy issues, but like different sort of daddy issues. There's a different sort of daddy issues that you have when daddy is physically present but is not emotionally available to you as you need him to be. And especially once the Scott Swift emails leaked, it became very clear just how much he commodifies Taylor, just so much how he sees Taylor as an extension of himself into the world and sees like her success as evidence of him doing well. And obviously there are a ton of things financially that Scott Swift did for Taylor starting out that got her, you know, on the bus, to use a League of Their Own reference. Scott Swift gave Taylor Swift the financing to get on that bus. But once she got to spring training and she had to bat and she had to catch balls and all of those things, so this metaphor derailed. But you get the point. Once she got into the industry, the amount of success that she has had is very, very motivated by the talent she has. So why are we analyzing media in the context of other media? So obviously I just introduced you to the concept of maybe there are secrets that she's telling. Very often there are a lot of secrets that she's telling. When you really deeply analyze TTPD, there are a lot of things in the subtext that are very concerning. And, I mean, honestly, her lyrics for a while. I was a functioning alcoholic till no one noticed my new aesthetic. Okay, after that point, she was what? A non-alcoholic? That doesn't seem reasonable given the fact no one noticed her new aesthetic. No one noticed the change in her. So if she was only a functioning alcoholic up to that point, we now understand that after that point she was a non-functional alcoholic. One of the things that surprises me the most about Taylor Swift, and one of the things that is most evident about how dominant her PR strategy is the fact that literally any artist that talked about alcohol with the frequency and in the manner that Taylor Swift does would be like, hey, do you need to be in rehab or something like that? It's fascinating to me that no one really acts like Taylor's consumption is a problem. And I'm just going to sprinkle this in here because I'm not really sure where to put it, because it's not strictly about TTPD, it's actually about folklore. But one of the things that I specifically believe about how Taylor uses media in reference to other media, or how Taylor uses media in her own work, is I believe the Folklore / Evermore forest is the same forest as the Into the Woods forest. Because A, the concept of the woods or out of the woods came up right around the time that Into the Woods was being filmed. So it very much makes me think, like, Taylor obviously knows a decent amount about Broadway. I'm pretty sure she has to be, like, familiar with Into the Woods at least. And what actually is the Into the Woods forest at its most basis form, but like the place where the consequences for like one's fairy tales play off. Like when those characters take action to get their fairy tale ending, and often that action is not necessarily like the most like wholesome of action. Sometimes it's a little crappy action. They suffer the consequences for that action Into the Woods. Like, there are a lot of metaphors and themes and things associated with the woods and Into the Woods, and it's very fascinating to think about folklore if it also exists in that context. And just growing up as a socially alienated millennial, there are so many times that the only like community or the only people like me were actually characters in different forms of media. So like I became very invested in a lot of characters in different forms of media, and hilariously enough, almost all of those characters turned out to be either queer-coded or queer. Taylor is similar in that. I really do think that she relates a lot to a lot of different media characters because she was an alienated child, and I think that's one of the reasons that she references things enough. I absolutely think that there are a lot of traits of characters and situations in Dead Poets Society that Taylor wants us to associate to her work, to herself, and to everything that she's doing. she is sending out so many different messages, right? She's sending out the messages in her lyrics. She's sending out the messages in what she wears when she's on these pap walks, when she's seen with her, her friends and her significant others. She's sending messages through the various interviews that she consents to and all of the things that she allows her people to leak out to people and all of the other media operations. And especially with her clothing, I think a lot of times like embroidery and really fine details are things that are critically important but that we also overlook. But also when she's out in public with her friends and stuff like that, it makes me realize that Taylor is not just an independent artist of herself. Taylor is very much a Mary Shelley type figure. Taylor is very much like the Romantics or the New Romantics or the Transcendentalists or any creative collaborative where a group of a lot of different types of performers and creators and things like that all come together to make stuff together. Rebecca Harkness and Salvador Dali, like she has been hinting at being obsessed with people that do things like this for a while, and it is very clear, like the Matty Healy of it all, I do not believe is romantic at all. I believe that Matty Healy loves performance art almost as much as Taylor, if not more, and I think that he is somebody who is a friend who is very often willing to jump into whatever performance art she needed. I do believe that he got involved in the specific manner that he did right before 1989 because things with Joe ended before she expected them to. She needed some sort of cover story while she was acting gay as hell. Like, this girl can act so gay, and so long as she's photographed holding hands with a dude every once in a while, no one notices, or a lot of people don't notice. All the lesbians notice. And, like, that's the angle. That's the thing. Like, there are a lot of people that are like, oh my god, don't interpret her stuff as gay. But here's the funny thing. Whenever Taylor does something that is particularly gay, they notice. They're always like, oh my god, the gaylers, the people that think Taylor are gay, they're going to be all over this. Oh, so you admit it looks f***ing gay? Like, I think everybody at this point agrees that it looks that way. And Taylor very obviously considers the way she is perceived. She could wear other colors. There are tons of colors that are not the lesbian flag colors. There are tons of colors that are not the bi flag colors. And I'm not exactly sure who originated this theory, but let's discuss the blender. I want to talk about Shelley Wright. If you are not familiar with her, she is a country singer that came up a little bit before Taylor, if I recall correctly, and early on in Taylor's career, the two had actually collaborated together. Shelley has since come out of the closet as a lesbian, and she has spoken out about all of the powerful forces that, especially in country music, especially when she was starting out in the like purity ring era, when it was very much a different culture about what women were allowed to do. I mean, the culture hasn't gotten that much better, but it was arguably worse back then.
As someone who has lived the double life in Hollywood and show business, how do you feel the political and social climate of being gay in Hollywood and the music industry is for someone who's like gone through it?
Yeah. Well, it's insane. It's inhumane. And something's got to give. And the machine of the hiding, and there's a big machine, let me tell you. I'm not an authority on Hollywood. I have marginal relationships with Hollywood, but I have enough relationships with people in Hollywood to know, I know a few people who are in hiding and have been in hiding.
And she's compared the industry to a blender because you just throw people in and then they get chewed up and spit out.
And what happens is the machine stays intact. And if you can imagine a blender and people get into it and the hiding just spits them out and you don't survive. You can't stay in it, but the machine stays fully intact. And it's unforgiving and it kills people spiritually and oftentimes physically.
And one of the things that she has said very prominent is that the only way the industry is ever going to change is if somebody comes out at the height of their game. And she had specifically said something like it needs to be an A-list singer at the top of her game and an NFL star need to come out of the closet and be like, hey, we're not actually straight.
And it's going to keep going until somebody who has something to lose stands up and just says, I'm gay. Somebody big to stand up. In Hollywood, we need somebody else in country music to stand up. We need somebody in the NFL to stand up. We need them all to stand up. We need our heroes.
So we very much know that Taylor has seen this documentary, right? Because there was a shirt that Shelley was wearing in this documentary, and Taylor has worn almost exactly the same shirt while she was going out on one of her early dates with Travis. And again, I'm not going to go deep into blender theory because a lot of other people have, and I don't want this to be a 5-hour video. That could be a spin-off video if people are interested. But there are a lot of things in the You Need to Calm Down video that suggest that blender imagery, Taylor breaking the blender, things of that nature. It very much seems like Taylor was poised to do this absolutely in 2019 when the Masters heist happened, but it also seems like she was trying to do something maybe similar around the Reputation era. That may actually be why everything happened with Kim and Kanye the way it was. But for certain, when her masters were sold, there were a lot of signs that she was imminently about to announce something big. Like, there was literally an interview that day that she was going to have this big announcement on, and she changed her mind at the last minute. The deeper you look into Taylor's work, the more you see her referencing queer women, queer artists over and over and over and over and over again. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I refuse to believe that it's a coincidence. I don't understand. Well, I do understand. It's homophobia. That's realistically, that is the big reason why it is such a contentious thing for Taylor to just say, hey, I like girls. And like I said, an element of this is that there are some people who believe they know the narrative 100%, and if they are told anything different, they are going to be hurt. And I genuinely don't know why those people still feel those things when Taylor has said a number of times about her bait and switches, about how she lies, and all of these things. But that said, I also feel like Taylor is at this point in her existence where, yes, she is trying to show people who are open to changing their minds what is going on behind the scenes. But it really seems like a lot of people are so scared of what they're seeing in the glimpses of what Taylor has behind the scenes, and that is causing people to act out in very bigoted ways against anybody who explores these theories. And I think Taylor is telling her story in so many ways. She's obviously telling us, point at the lyrics, point at the lyrics, point at the lyrics. But also at the same time, she has been stretching her wings out in this filmmaking sense more. Obviously, we know that she's in the agreement stages of working on making some films as a writer, possibly a director, and other roles like that. But we very much know that she has done a lot of work on the large majority of her music videos since after Reputation era, when she was on the new contract. And I think it's so important that on her birthday, when everybody was expecting something very critical, very important, very groundbreaking for her, she gave us the behind the scenes for the music videos. There were a lot of people that were let down, but I think there's a lot of things in the behind the scenes of those music videos that are explaining, that are Easter eggs, that are kind of geared at getting her audience more where she needs them to be so she can release Rep Taylor's version and debut Taylor's version. But also, I think most people who consider themselves artists, and I very much think that Taylor Swift considers herself an artist, wants to have their music be applicable to multiple circumstances. They want people to interpret it different ways. They want it to apply to multiple different scenarios or things like that. A lot of people who are very artistic about their music are doing a lot of fascinating things, and a lot of times, I've said this a number of times before, we do not give Taylor Swift enough credit for all of the things she's doing. There are so many ways that TTPD can be interpreted, can be perceived. There are so many different lenses that you can analyze it through, and I think this is one of the reasons that we are going to be analyzing this album for a while. We're absolutely going to be analyzing it up until Rep and Debut come out, but I think there's this fascinating thing that Taylor does where every single time she gives us a greater peek into her life, a greater peek into her story, into the narratives, every time she braids those webs of stories together so we can see the overarching whole of everything that she is and everything that she's written and everything that she can be. I don't even remember what I was saying other than that just Taylor is such a compelling artist, and everything that I have noticed with TTPD and how she constantly contextualizes and recontextualizes her life and her story and keeps people invested and interesting, it is things that we are going to be studying for a number of years. I think whoever styles her is incredible at understanding how to craft a very specific image of Taylor, how to convey a very specific meaning. A lot of times she uses bird and cage imagery. She uses the plane with the wing cut off imagery. When she's going out in public, she has a lot of these shoes and purses and things like that have bridles or other components of equestrian horse stuff. Sorry, I'm not really very horse knowledgeable, but a lot of the things that she has had on her person, especially when she was out in public with Travis, have been things that you use to control a wild horse. And there's this image that Taylor presents of herself as a child of being wild and untamed. She's even mentioned the author of the book Untamed, which if you know that book, you know where I'm going. There's just this young Taylor was wild and untamed, and the industry and the world really forced her to be this very specific thing, and to straighten her hair and to dress a certain way and to act a certain way and all of these things. And we see hints of her wildness creeping out. We have this song, The Bolter, that I really very much reflects who she was as a child, and like just this very devil-may-care attitude. I consider all of the videos that I've seen of her as a child, and I think about her wildness, her inner wildness, and how everything about that is in complete dissonance with the way she acts, with the way she dresses, with the accessories that she has when she's with Travis. Travis is never in his Eras Tour swag. He's never dressed up like Taylor. Travis never molds his identity around Taylor, but Taylor molds her identity around Travis. And that is something that we see so stereotypically in so many relationships of wealthier people. Especially, like, wealthier men very often want their wife to be a trophy. They do not want a wife that is going to have opinions of herself, that is going to have power and money of her own. And that's why I think the narrative that is being told with the story of Taylor and Travis is so fascinating, because I do think one of the elements of it is like, if you don't demand better of the person that Taylor Swift, somebody that you ostensibly respect, like if you're not going to demand better of Taylor Swift, if you're not going to think that Taylor Swift should have a better romance than the one that she's been displaying to the world, there's a very big chance that in your own life you are also accepting less. And that's kind of what I've thought that narrative has been about how the fans will just eat up the bare minimum out of a relationship for Taylor without considering all of these signs and symbols that she's showing that she's miserable. I really think that Taylor, especially with the stuff that she's been doing more recently, is trying to make us more media literate. She is trying to make us more skeptical of the things that we read in the newspapers. She's trying to make us realize that a great many of things that happen in Hollywood are facades. When you look back at the history of Hollywood, you see a number of marriages and relationships that were just for PR, that were not as monogamous as they seemed in the surface, that were just fronts for people that were sleeping with any number of other people on the side. Hollywood show business as a whole is where the best theater kids and the most wealthy Nepo babies congregate. And if you think about what theater kids are, like the large majority of kids that I knew who were in theater when we were all kids, we're all out now. It is so weird to me that Hollywood has managed to continue this delusion that the large majority of people in Hollywood are well-adjusted and in monogamous relations with only one person, and they don't have partners on the side, and most people aren't ethically non-monogamous, and most people aren't queer. Like, how is that believable? Like, genuinely, if you have spent any time amongst people that are in the theater, how do you not believe that all of those people are going to the Grammys after party and boinking? Like, obviously, the Diddy parties are a specifically bad example of debauchery that went in frequently illegal directions, but also, when people talk about the Diddy parties, there's often this understanding that, like, the party gets worse the longer you stay, and it seems like a lot of the celebrities were at least staying until the part of the party when the swinging happened. A lot of them, I would like to hope, got out of the party before the children went into the bedroom. But I'm begging people, and I also think Taylor is begging people as well, to overcome these ideas that it is worthwhile for wealthy women to marry a single mediocre man and make her entire life over in his image. Like, the number of people that are like, oh, the Eras Tour is over, now Taylor can be on the sidelines, barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen all the time. The number of people that do not respect Taylor's career, all of the powerful things that she's done in her life, that directly think that the only reason that she is unhappy is because she hasn't been allowed to marry the right man yet, and not because there are so many pressures on her about who the right man is. The number of times that she has directly referenced people like Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, people that were very open about the fact that their relationship was not monogamous. Elizabeth Taylor participated in bearding lavender relationships. they fought in public because they know it was what their fans wanted to read about in the paper. Like, they would have fights in these hotel rooms where they knew the walls were thin and they knew the media was around, so that they would be overheard and make a nice article about it so they can satisfy, the desires of the press. If you are famous, you are going to get clicks, you are going to get purchases, you are going to get people consuming the media. And because of that, the closer to A-list you are, the more it personally behooves you to invent a fantastical narrative that people on the outside can believe in, so that you can just have your private life and go to your little parties where you swing. Go to your little key parties. Like, so many facets of the fandom have had these complicated discussions. Well, we're not sure if this relationship was over yet because she was seen with this person. Well, when she was seen with this person, maybe she was with both of them at the same time. Maybe she's really slow to commit. Maybe she's only doing open relationships. And even amongst LGBTQ people, there are a lot of people that are anti-poly lifestyle, because there are a lot of people that are very harmful that say that they're poly, but they're actually narcissists who are just trying to hurt people. And a lot of people have been burned by one of those people. I do know a number of people that have made poly work, and especially when everybody involved is very wealthy and has their own stuff going on and things like that, it can be a very good solution. I have gone back and forth over the years on whether or not I believe that there is anything real or true going on between Taylor and Joe, or Taylor and Travis. And I know that this is a minefield discussion. Just because somebody is in a PR relationship with somebody does not mean that they are not also in a real relationship. In famous people, it is very likely elements of both. But we very much know that the narrative that was being told with Joe, that they were all happy and hunky-dory, and like towards the end, everybody's like, oh, they're gonna get married soon, they're looking at houses together, all of these things. That was a narrative that was to convey a very specific purpose and meaning. It kept Taylor sheltered when she needed to be sheltered. And she still needs to be sheltered. So obviously, most of us that believe that there is a huge PR element to Taylor and Joe, Taylor and Travis, also believe that at some point in time in the past, actually probably multiple times in the past, she has tried to actually present herself as herself. And she had had plans to reveal her true self in the past. And that was what the Lover era was supposed to be. And that plan got circumvented because of everything that happened with the Masters heist. She couldn't afford in that moment to lose all of those fans, or else she would never be able to have the financial backing to own all of her work. And I think Miss Americana and everything surrounding that is one of the biggest pieces of evidence. But the whole first half of Miss Americana has been described by many people, both fans and critics alike, as seemingly building up to something that it doesn't deliver on. Now, obviously, we know that a lot of this is related to how Taylor's life and media strategy both had to change because of the fallout from the Reputation era, then the Masters heist, then not being able to immediately act upon regaining the rights to her work because she's in the middle of 2020. Taylor has been poking a number of holes in the narrative of all of her relationships, and has been for a while. And another big example is the documentary director has said about how she spent like over a year with Taylor, really built up her trust, was with her through most of her most intimate moments, and this was during the height of when she would be dating Joe, but she didn't meet Joe until the very end. And if Joe is the very end, why is there this like off-screen lover who is present in earlier scenes? Like, we know that can't be Joe, because if he was present in those earlier scenes, the director would not have met him like a year on. The more you actually critically look at all of the evidence, the more you realize these relationships are very heavily inflated for PR. And we also have all those 2020 interviews for Folklore where she like seems really sad and dejected, and like, I get that everybody was sad around 2020, but no one was as sad and lonely as Taylor, and she was allegedly quarantining with her boyfriend. When you actually sit back and take a non-Swiftie-pilled look at everything, you realize, like, how much time do these people spend together? Very often after Travis's games, Taylor's right back on the jet, like, the second the game is over. There is also the fact that Travis has lived with Ross Travis for many years. He's never seemingly lived with Taylor. Let's very briefly talk about the manuscript, because I could talk about the manuscript for hours. I'm going to do a separate video for that, though. So I believe the manuscript is actually the first track of the anthology. It just works out a lot of ways better if you listen to those tracks in reverse order, starting with the manuscript. And especially those like first 6 tracks, especially that like manuscript into Robin, into Peter, it just feels like the beginning of an album would. But it also feels like the beginning of a film soundtrack, like I've said. TTPD soundtrack for Dead Poets Society. If you put it in reverse order, flip it in reverse. I've done an entire video on that if you're curious about that. Especially if you look at the beginning, now and then she rereads the manuscript of the entire torrid affair. It sounds more like this is the beginning of a story and like this is the starting context than like this is the end of the story, at least to me. And the name manuscript has been weird for a lot of people since the very beginning. A lot of us noticed manuscript, and especially in the context of Taylor is probably ultimately writing this PR narrative of these relationships that she has. It makes a lot more sense to call it the manuscript because it is about the men she's scripted and the man she's currently scripting. Then she goes into these lines, they compared their licenses. He said, "I'm not a donor, but I'd give you my heart if you needed it." Like, these aren't really like, this is not a romantic setting. This is not a romantic relationship. This sounds like, hey, you have a problem that you needed solved with your love life. I'm a professional, I can handle it, so let's just pretend. He said if the sex was half as good as the conversation was, soon they'd be pushing strollers, but soon it was over. And I think a lot of people do take that in the context of what he told her, but I take it also in the context of like what he told other people. It was basically like, oh yeah, you know, if Taylor is as good as I think she is, we're gonna get married. The way like men kind of gloat, especially when a relationship isn't as real. You know when you have those friends and their relationship isn't real or serious, so they're always like fronting on social media about, oh, how sweet he is and oh, how nice she is and all of those things. It feels very much like that. It feels very much like a front. Then she discusses the context of some of her earliest relationships. Some of her relationships where the age gaps were the largest. And there's a line in there that really crushes me that I don't think gets enough credit. Afterwards, she only ate kids' cereal and couldn't sleep unless it was in her mother's bed. It really gives the portrayal of just how much she was a child in these adult situations. The manuscript, when you really take it from the perspective of this is actually the beginning of like the truth part of her narrative, the things that she probably very often, especially early in her career, could not address as much. Like I've said, you really can't necessarily go out there and hate on Scott Swift when you're Taylor Swift and you guys work together and he's your dad. But there's a lot of themes in the anthology about these daddy issues, about that fractured father-daughter relationship and things of that nature. There's definitely this portrayal about how young she was, how unprepared she was, how she was a child in relationships with adult men. And I also very much suspect, based on things that she said in TTPD, that not all of it was above board. Like, not all of it was just age gap relationships. We have so many figures in Hollywood that started young that get hurt. And it really seems like she's hinting that it wasn't just those people she was in relationships with that hurt her, that she likely had to do things that she didn't want to do in order to keep her space. And then we come into the bridge, and I think bridges are always very important with Taylor Swift. She knows that we're going to focus on them a lot, and I think that this bridge is the instructions. And the years passed like scenes of a show. The professor said to write what you know, and that makes me think more about a lot of people interpret blank space from the perspective of PR relationships. Putting on shows, putting on a performance. I've said before that every time we have seen Taylor Swift for a long period of time, she has been Taylor Swift the brand. We never see her disheveled. We never see her coming out of the gym in her dirty sweats. We never see her going to buy herself a coffee. We never see her, you know, taking the cat to the vet. And obviously, I mean, sure, she has people that does a lot of these things, but she used to be seen more publicly when she wasn't as put together. And because she doesn't do that anymore, because so much of what she exists in her real life happens behind the shadows, A, I always assume that when we see her, there's a reason and there's a message being sent. But B, it very highly supports this notion that a lot of us have that these relationships are at minimum inflated for PR, if not entirely PR. And I do want to discuss, like, just because a relationship is PR doesn't mean it's entirely PR. Sometimes people get together as PR and they hit it off and they have a real relationship. Sometimes there's a real relationship, and because the real relationship is going well, they get into PR. That said, I really don't think Travis and Taylor are that serious. They have had any number of opportunities to spend more time together, but it really seems like they only spend the bare minimum time together. It is only when fans are starting to get suspicious that there might be something going on. And like the moment people aren't suspicious anymore, you don't see them together for 2 weeks. And there are a number of times when like realistically, a good boyfriend would have been there for Taylor in those moments, but yet he was just like getting drunk with his friends and being a stupid, football bro. I admit, I don't think very highly of Travis. He likes claiming that he knows all the words to the songs and stuff like that, but like he mouthed along to blank space a couple times. If you ask him for the title of a song that's not blank space, he very often can't give you one. He really does not seem to know that much about her, except for the PR bulletin points that he was likely given. But let's move on to the next set of lyrics. Then the actors were hitting their marks, and the slow dance was alight with the sparks, and the tears fell in synchronicity with the score. So there are a couple of things. These are shows that I'm putting on with actors. They are doing all of their marks perfectly to the point where it is getting an emotional reaction out of my audience. I also think a lot of lines in the manuscript are instructional of how to sync it up with Dead Poet Society. I'm not going to bring that in here because I've already discussed it in my Dead Poet Society video though. And at last she knew what the agony had been for. She went through the agony because she's kind of like Jesus. She suffers for our sins and she makes the music that gives us catharsis. She suffers so that we can benefit from her music, and we benefit from her music in a number of ways. I discussed in my All Too Well video about how like Taylor could stand up on a podium every day for the rest of her life and say bad things about age gap relationships, and it will never, ever, ever be as successful as what she did with All Too Well 10-minute version and Give Me Back My Girlhood. It was mine first. That line still hits me like a gut punch every time I hear it, because I relate to it, because so many of us relate to it, because so many of us in our society are sexualized before we're ready. We are leered at before we even hit puberty. We have men making weird comments at us while we're just at the grocery store at 8 years old. I remember being 9 years old at the library and this weird freaking guy looking at my mom while he was wanking it into a library book, and like, just the number of ways that like we are exposed to things that we are not prepared to see. We are expected to be like sex kittens for men who are much older than us. It is incredibly damaging. I do think it is an incredibly big part of the manuscript as well. It's just like, hey, these things people up, and that really ties into the last two lines. Now and then I reread the manuscript, but the story isn't mine anymore. There are a lot of elements of these stories that she puts into place because of the benefit of her listeners, because she knows that they will help us heal. I think she puts a lot of really complicated emotions and really complicated scenarios that a lot of people end up in, and she really just has a gift at making people feel catharsis, right? There are so many relationship archetypes that I ended up in that like felt very isolating when I was in them, but now that I have 6 Taylor Swift songs that are about that relationship archetype, like when I was a 15-year-old being courted by 24-year-olds on the internet, I did not have shoulda, woulda, coulda. I did not have All Too Well. I really needed them, but I got them now. And I have been delivered so much catharsis and so much healing, and so much of TTPD really feels specifically like healing the wounds that happen to women under cis heteronormativity, especially when we are trying to comply with everything that we are supposed to allegedly be, while we're simultaneously supposed to be this like virginal queen, but also at the same time, you know, lady in the street but a freak in the bed. There is this dichotomy from what we're expected to be, an often very objectifying dichotomy. We know that Taylor has read a book called Untamed by Glennon Doyle. She is a writer that has written about a number of subjects, but she is somebody who is a late-in-life lesbian who realized after she was married with kids that she actually loved women, and that was a mind F for her. And let me tell you, as another late-in-life lesbian, it was a mind F for me. And it is really clear when you look through Taylor's work that she has read Untamed, that she has taken its message to heart, and really the root message of Untamed is that being a good girl so that other people don't have to suffer only ensures that you take on other people's suffering. When you are a good girl, you are taking on other people's suffering rather than actually getting what you need, rather than saying, hey, this doesn't benefit me, this isn't helping me, this is only hurting me. My name is Erin Moriarty. I make videos on pop culture, especially things that relate to Taylor Swift and her circle of friends. So if this video was interesting for you, I have a ton of other videos on Taylor Swift, and I am still a very small content creator, so your likes, comments, and subscriptions really do help me out a lot. This isn't like a set theory so much as this is a framework within other theories can exist, and a framework for considering and analyzing theories and creating theories. So I'm very curious what people have to say down below, but if you're closed-minded, I'm just going to delete it. Thank you so very much. Bye-bye.